I chose this topic because I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that, in 2022, we are still working the same amount of hour of the 90s, of the 80s. I was like, how is that possible that with the whole proper technology revolution that we had in the last 20 years and we all the new working tools that we have nowadays, I couldn't understand how come that our days are still, following the rhythm of these 8 hours of these 9 to 5 jobs.
This week, I'm very appreciative to have as my guest Carlotta Dal Pozzo. Carlotta is an Italian woman based in Berlin with a passion for everything related to occupational psychology and companies culture. Taking her first steps into innovative ways of working, she's an advocate of a reduced working week. As more and more companies are struggling with the Great Resignation, I feel it is particularly important to learn more from different generations about their expectations regarding to the future of work. In this episode, I speak with Carlotta about her recently finished bachelor thesis in psychological science about debunking the myth of the 9 to 5 working hours. I found it very interesting to have with Carlotta another guest who has written a university thesis about various aspects of flexible work. To me, it follows the trend of many surveys that offering various modes of flexible work is increasingly expected as a given to attract and retain talent. Carlotta told me about her research regarding various European case studies and theoretical models. She also shared her personal observations regarding work in Germany and Italy. Welcome to the show, Carlotta.
Thank you, Karin. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. And now, for people who are listening to us from all over the world, could you tell them, please, where are you calling in from? And is there a site or food that is particular for your area?
Yes, so I'm calling you from Berlin. I'm lucky enough to call this city my hometown since 8 years ago, and I wouldn't change it for anything else. And being Italian, it's difficult to choose a a favorite food from Germany, but definitely there are many wonderful sites here. It's also difficult to choose a favorite one from there, but from here. But I would say that any landscape you could have in summertime with a beautiful sunset on the river, that's really a sweet spot in Berlin.
Thank you so much. I was in Berlin a few years ago, and I remember it just looks with the river, it's just beautiful on the buildings, old and new combined. It's just a very amazing sight. Yes,
it's true. Yeah, it's a special thing from this city to really see the comparison between new and old.
Yeah. So now, Carlotta, you recently finished your bachelor thesis in psychological science about debunking the myth of the 9 to 5 working hours. I'm curious, what made you decide to write your thesis about this topic?
Yeah, so I chose this topic because I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that in 2022, we are still working the same amount of hour of the 90s, of the 80s. I was like, how is that possible that with the whole proper technology revolution that we had in the last 20 years and we all the new working tools that we have nowadays, I couldn't understand how come that our days are still, following the rhythm of these 8 hours of these 9 to 5 jobs. So I wondered why we didn't have any revolution in working time as well, and also what could be the consequences, what could be the impact of changing the working time in different aspects of our working and private life.
That sounds so interesting. And now, your thesis is in Italian, and I'm super appreciative that you translated for me the titles of the chapters. So, can you give our listeners an overview of, like, you have a theoretical part and a more practical part. So, can we start with your theoretical part?
For sure. So in the first half of my thesis, I focus more on the definition of working time. So what are, the most common examples and varieties of working time contracts that you could have nowadays. Then I also focus a little bit on the historical development of the working hours after, the big fights and revolution that we had after the Industrial Revolution, of course. And then on a final part, and I think it's one of the most important of the thesis, I tried to focus on what could be the concrete impact of a change in working time, in productivity, percentage of occupation, and then the work-life balance, mental and physical health, climate change, and of course also on gender equality. So it was with great pleasure that I could see that a decrease in working time could have really, really positive impacts in almost all of these criteria and aspects. For example, in productivity, we know that for many different kinds of job, especially really, really repetitive jobs and mentioned, the last hour of the working day, it's completely useless. The researchers that I looked at, they took as a reference of productivity the number of calls that could be done in a call center, and they could see that if you could avoid to work the last hour of a day, in the end of the week, the productivity would stay the same or it would actually increase. Then also in terms of occupation, it's pretty logical to say that if you decrease the working time of one employee, then at some point you will have to create new job positions and so increase the level of occupation. But we have to say that in this case, this whole process should be supported by the government and the social institution. Is not something that could be paid 100% by the employer. And then also work-life balance, of course, which I think goes hand to hand with health. I mean, it's also pretty forward to think that having more time for ourselves to spend however we want, it could be education, it could be for traveling, to spend more time with our families, or just to relax. In the end, it would have a really good impact on the overall satisfaction and motivation of an employee. Then in matter of health, I think we can safely say that to decrease the amount of hours worked could be directly connected with a better physical health, mental health, a really high amount of hours worked is directly connected with higher cases of burnout, which is a pretty silent, I think, pandemic that we are we are having in the last years. And also, I think it's worth mentioning that something that Corona and working from home showed us is that also in terms of climate change, not having to go to the office and rethinking a little bit the work structure we are used to could have a really good impact in terms of, consumption and also and sustainability. Also, a pretty important topic for me that I enjoyed touching in this theoretical part of my thesis is the gender equality. So how reducing the working time could have a good impact on the level of occupation of women, and how having, let's say, a spread part-time could give the opportunity to women to not having to choose between a career or having a family, and also being able to share in a more adequate way the unpaid labor that we have to sustain.
I'm curious, how your research might have been influenced. Did you switch it, or did you, maybe add something because of, your research happening during the pandemic?
Yeah, exactly. So I wished I could put something more inputs of what were the effect of the pandemic on this topic, but unfortunately the studies were pretty fresh. They weren't really reviewed, so I prefer to not put in them there. But I think it's pretty clear to us that also working from home opened our eyes under many aspects, and also putting us face to face to the topic, okay, my productivity is not directly affected by the hours I work. I could work 2 hours in the morning and then have 2-hour break, and then work again 4 hours in the afternoon, or even at night if I am more productive at that point. And what should matter in the end of the day, it's just my productivity and finding way to be the most productive.
Yes. I completely agree. Yeah, I have to admit, I'm somebody who likes to work late at night, always have been. And, doing this from a home office makes life much easier.
And then also the time that one can save not having to drive or to take public transport to go to work. It's always, I think it's also, made us understood, okay, I'm really saving a lot of time. How can I use this time in a different way? And also putting us in a situation to say, I'm not sure if I want to come back. I don't know if I want to compromise this time that I'm saving now. And so I think there's a big switch. Also, now we are in this situation where companies start to say, okay, should we go back to the office? Should we stay as we are now? Should we have some hybrid opportunities? And I see that this could be also a major switch in the work industry. I can imagine maybe people refusing to go back to the office and going to companies where they offer flexible working hours and working from home 100%.
Yeah. I mean, here in North America, there's definitely, what is defined here as the great resignation, for what you exactly mentioned, that people are saying, hey, I am able to find other jobs that might either have no need to go to the office at all, or fewer days than what I'm currently in. And so you're absolutely right. Yes, I think, to me, it's just amazing how being forced to switch overnight to working from home in many cases, how it became possible, versus before people like, oh, as you mentioned, the productivity, how do we know, how can we trust people, etc. So yeah, it's really fascinating. And your thesis also had a practical part where you looked at many case studies from multiple European countries. And could you walk our listeners through, these case studies and what you've learned from it?
Yeah, for sure. I focused on different practical examples of experiments that we had in Europe. I started with the French case, which started in the beginning of the 2000s, where there was a switch from 30 hours a week to 30 to 35. It was paid by the government, and it was, let's say, a long-term solution with the aim of increase the occupation level. And overall, this experiment had really good results, as the French population had an increase, in work-life balance satisfaction. But I would say that the con of this change was that it wasn't really thought deeply, and they only found a solution for all the different industries. So this change had really bad implication for the hospital system, because they couldn't create enough new working places. And so the personnel there was overworked. So I would say that for that particular field, the bad consequences were more than the positive ones. Then there's a big German example, the one of Volkswagen, that in the end of the 90s had to switch from a 40 hours week to a 28. And it was made just in a temporary way to avoid a mass layoff. And this was paid by the employer, so it was a good investment. But we can say that it was the best decision for them, because their employees were highly trained on that type of industry, so it would then be way difficult for them to find other occupation, and then also it would be non-convenient for the employee to lose this high qualified employee and then have to train new ones. But this had some really interesting consequences, not really just in terms of work and occupation and productivity, but I find that in this case, the most interesting results were on a social point of view. We can say that the whole company used to live in the same small town, and having this difference in working time and working day schedule had completely changed the whole life of this village. Also, the shop had to open in different time, and also an interesting data is that the number of divorces registered after this change in working time went to the roof, because people had more spare time to spend with their family, and it probably it didn't work out that well. Then also another interesting experiment was the one of this Belgian company called FEM, which started in 2020 and it lasted 1 year. And they went from a 36 working hour week to a 30 week. So I would say that overall, this experiment brought really good results. But the interesting point in this is that this company, it's formed by 100% women. And so they could see that even though the aim of this test was to get to a preferable, a more comfortable working week, and also have more time to have more free time, they could see that, especially in the heterosexual couples, they could see that actually having more free time put them to a more unbalanced share of the unpaid labor. So as these women had more time, more free time compared to their men, to their spouse, they actually took more charge of the domestic work. So many of them, most of the women that actually used to live in a household with their partner, they actually prefer to go back to the old working time for this reason. And then the last example, which I think it's really, really relevant and really important because it's the newest one with the newest data, as it lasted the last 7 years, is the one from the town of Reykjavik in Iceland. So they decided to go from a 40 hours working week to a 35 one. They decided to do that because even though Iceland is one of the richest country in the world, the level of productivity was way lower compared to the other Nordic countries. And they also had a higher working hours and then also a very long expected working life. So this experiment started actually within the government and the people working with it within the government. And then after that, they gave the opportunity to big businesses, but also to small businesses to participate in this experiment. And after a couple of years, they've reached the 86% of the working population obtained a switch to a shorter working hour. And then they were also, what really makes the difference in this experiment compared to the other ones and what made this really successful, in my opinion, is that they had a task force that was focusing on creating and developing new strategies in way to reduce the working time in every industry. So that's also why this experiment was, in my opinion, really important, because it wasn't only applied, let's say, on an industry, but it was applied to every kind of field, such as retail, schools, even police station, really in every workplace. So this, I think the big learning from this experiment is that there's no ad hoc solution. We cannot say, let's just switch from 40 hours week to 35 hours week. We cannot just say, there's no one rule that can be applied to every job, but for every topic and even for the smallest details, we should have to put some thinking into that.
I find it really fascinating what you said with regards to Iceland, to look at it from more on a whole I say population or country basis, or from a cultural perspective. And so therefore, going what you said, that in some cases, if it is maybe somebody who is female, who has more time, then one potential negative effect might be that indeed the care work might be shifted more towards this. But if you look at it on a big level, if everybody works fewer hours, then it might be more easily, balanced to have a more equal care work, method.
The study that I found more shocking, speaking about gender gaps, gender equality, was the study coming from the European Commission, where actually they tried to compare on a different working schedule of men. They tried to see how many hours were involved into the household duties. And they could see that actually, when they compared this amount of hours between the men working 40 hours and the men working 30 hours a week, they could see that there weren't a big difference in there. So it's not, I mean, from the data we have until now, we cannot really say that the men will participate more on this unpaid labor if they were to work less. But this is also, we have to ask ourselves, okay, is this happening because in any ways women are working less? Would it make the difference if women will work the same amount of hours of men? This is really interesting.
It is really interesting. And, I'm a big proponent, and that's why I talk to a lot of dad advocates, that we need to have more male role models doing care work, speaking about it, and demonstrating that anybody can do care work. And so that somebody who might honestly simply have never had that experience, that their respective dad, uncle, or some other male relative has taken care of children, that this is an okay thing to do, and that maybe in the beginning it might be something difficult or unusual to do, and there might be quote unquote mistakes, and one forgets the diaper bag or whatnot, but everybody can learn this, and that it isn't something necessarily that is sort of automatically something that only women can do. And and so that's as we were talking a little bit about Nordic countries. So in Norway, one of my guests spoke about the fact that in preschools there are many male preschool teachers. So really early on, the mindset is already there for the children, being able to communicate with male preschooler teachers, but also for the parents, because they see, oh, there is a male preschool teacher, so it becomes a more normal thing that anybody can do care work.
True, for sure.
And so now, having people listening to us from business and an HR perspective, what would you say as far as trying to attract and retain talent based on your research? Can you have 3 suggestions that you feel might help them?
In my opinion, what should be really considered by HR departments or business leaders, it's flexibility. First of all, I think it's important to take in consideration that each one of us has different level of productivity, as we said, in different time of the day. We have different needs, and definitely there's the opportunity nowadays to find a different job or a different work that could be more aligned with our priorities. And then something that definitely should be taken in consideration is the culture of the company, which doesn't mean, as it's really common in Berlin to to have companies that gives, gym benefits, fruits and snacks, in the office, and many could think that that's the culture, that's the benefit they could give you, but it's actually something else. I think we should give importance to the feedback culture, leadership culture, promotions. How can a company handle stressful situation, and the importance that it's given not only to productivity and results, but also to the real well-being of the employees. And then, as last suggestion, I would say that innovation and giving learning opportunities to the employees is something that nowadays it's really important. As I think, in the past generations, the aim was to have a secure job, so find a secure position where to spend 20 years, 30 years, and being happy with this security. But nowadays, I think the big difference is that what this new generation wants to do is to take as much learning as possible from different companies to get, in the end of the day, the more specialized one could be in a field. So it's really common to spend 3-4 years or even just a couple of years in one company and then jump to the next one. And then I think the retention in this case, is not just going to be related to salary, even though it's really important, but also what can keep an employee with its company. It's definitely, as I said, the flexibility that it's given, the culture and the innovation and the opportunity to learn new things possible.
And, so from your own experience, you said, you're Italian living in Berlin. Do you know, so when you look at Italy compared to Germany and maybe the organizational cultures and how they maybe help new generations to come on board, have you, do you know some example you could share from Italy potentially, where you think that's something they have done extremely well, or, something surprising?
I have to be honest, I'm lucky that I have a German example, in this industry where I think, it's pretty innovative. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, I think that Italy, it's still a couple of years late, I would say. I know I spoke with some friends where, in the middle of the pandemic, working from home was pretty difficult. There was still, this not trusting mentality to say, if I don't see you working, you're not working for real, which is unbelievable in my opinion. But, I'm sure that there are new realities where this generation exchange already happened, and where you don't have, the stereotype of businessman being in the top hierarchy of this company. With innovative mindset. But I will say that I'm happy here. I'm happy here in Germany for the moment. Maybe in a couple of years I will think about going there, or why not? Being the one bringing this new mentality there. Who knows? But for the moment, it's what it is. Yes.
Thank you so much for sharing, Carlotta. Now, as we're coming towards the end of our conversation, I want to make sure, is there anything else you would like to share with our listeners that we have not covered yet?
Definitely. What I would like to say is that, going back to the reducing working time, I would say that the big change didn't happen yet because there's no pressure for this. As there wasn't pressure before the pandemic to start working from home, to find new ways of working, in the same way, now there's no pressure to change this working time. And I'm also sure that we cannot wait for institution or, politician to take part in these changes. So I'm sure that this revolution is going to be driven by youth and from new business owners or, open-minded people. So I wish and invite everyone that has the opportunity to at least experiment this, to give it a try. Just to give it a try. Let's see how it goes. We have nothing to lose. We have seen that we can change our working habits really fast. So let's try to give it a try.
That I love that. Be brave to face uncertainty, and the worst thing is, well, it was a unsuccessful experiment, but we've learned something from it.
Exactly. Totally.
And now, Carlotta, how can people find you?
People could reach me on LinkedIn, looking for Carlotta Dal Pozzo, and I would be really, really happy to connect with like-minded people, and maybe one day we will create this revolution together.
That sounds wonderful. I really do. I'm a big, as you know, big proponent of flexible work of every type. So thank you so much, Carlotta, for being on the show, and it was wonderful having you.
Thank you. Thanks to you, Karin, for having taken the time to have me here. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We hope you gained valuable insights and new ideas. To keep listening to future episodes, please head over to iTunes or your favorite player and subscribe and give it a rating. We would very much appreciate a review and for you to share it on social media, so more people can start innovating in how they offer employment. Until the next time, goodbye!